Welcome to another episode of Between Two Nerds. I'm Nick Stowe, the State Chief Technology Officer for the state of Washington. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to our Chief Data Officer, Irene Vidyanti, about a very exciting and important topic, and that's enterprise data management. So thank you for joining me, Irene.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so my first question for you is the easiest one, and that's, what is enterprise data management?
So let's start with enterprise data. And enterprise data is about connecting data across the whole enterprise so we can have a holistic insight into what the whole enterprise is doing. So we can do better planning and we can do better acting on the information that we have. So I like to use the parable of blind man and an elephant, I think, to illustrate just how important the concept of enterprise data and therefore enterprise data management is. So if you're not familiar with it, it's about a few blind men who went to try to figure out an elephant, but each of them is touching a different part of the elephant. The one person was touching the elephant's legs and said, "Oh, I'm dealing with a tree trunk here," and then another man might be dealing with the elephant's tail, and then said, "Oh, we're dealing with a snake here." Another one might be touching the ear and said, "Oh, we're dealing with a fan here." So each of their perspective is not wrong given the data that they have, but collectively, if we can connect the data that all of them have together into one whole, you have a much better holistic understanding of the problem or the issue that you're dealing with, and therefore you have a much better way of making robust decisions based on the entire enterprise connected data that you have.
So I appreciate you explaining what enterprise data management is. I'd also like if you could talk a little bit about why enterprise data management is important. Why do I need to understand the entirety of the elephant? What does it mean in terms of outcomes or impacts or decisions that we make?
Yeah, so I may digress a little bit to first talk about why I am in government. I like the idea of solving complex challenges with data, and that is really what the government deals with. Mm-hmm. I think there is a lot of better understanding now that the challenges that the government face are really, really complex, multifaceted challenges. We talk about homelessness, climate change, reducing recidivism. These are all really, really multifaceted in nature. There are so many root causes. All of this are really everyone's problems. It's not the responsibility of only one program or one single state agency. It really requires the collaboration and connected data across multiple state agencies.
Do you have another, either from your experience in working with the state of Washington or in other areas, another kind of contextual example of the value that having all of these different entities be able to share data provides, and a good focus, like a description of an outcome or some kind of problem that can be solved by bringing all these different types of data together?
Yeah. So one of the projects that I worked in LA County, I think illustrated how just bringing together data from a few different agencies can already start to eliminate that that elephant of a problem. So our enterprise data system brought together data from probation department, the courts, Department of Mental Health, and the law enforcement, and we were able to see that among people under supervision who have a diagnosis of severe mental illness from the Department of Mental Health, those who actually get treatment from the department versus those who do not engage in treatment have very differential outcomes in terms of recidivism by reconviction rate when we look at the both reconviction and rearrest when we look at the courts and law enforcement data, but also at the rate of mental health crisis. And yet we saw that the probation department might not even have that idea that there are these people with a severe mental illness diagnosis who may need referral to treatment.
I want to change gears a little bit. I have one area that I'd like your perspective on, and that's the intersection of equity in serving underserved communities and enterprise data. So can you talk a little bit about the relationship between enterprise data and being able to see the elephant and our ability to be able to better serve those communities who have been marginalized or have historically been underserved?
Well, first of all, I think the role of enterprise data in getting us that holistic understanding of how are we even doing as a state in terms of addressing equity issues, I think that is going to be very important. Mm-hmm. To use another example from LA County, we were trying to understand the digital equity landscape across Los Angeles County, and we created maps looking at the intersection between income, which we use as a proxy for the marginalized community, as well as against the measures of digital equity that we were looking at, including broadband connectivity, digital literacy, as well as several other measures. And I think not surprisingly, there is a very high correlation between income and those measures of digital equity.
One of my favorite questions that I've heard at least many people who work in the state of Washington ask is who is not represented in our data. And so I do think that even bringing a lot of these entities together to talk about the data that we have and how that assesses against our determinants of equity, and then asking questions around who's not represented is really important. So I appreciate that. Yeah,
that is actually a good question, and maybe to nerd out a little bit, because this is, after all, between two nerds. I think that question of who is not represented in the state data, I think is actually an important one to consider, because when we talk about enterprise data, we are often talking about bringing together data that the state government already has or will be collecting, but I think there needs to be an acknowledgement that there are populations, Washington state populations, who are currently just not served by the state. So one potential vision for the enterprise data program is also to partner with academics in building that set of data that is also allowing us to look at the state population more holistically, bringing in data from the census as well as other data sources, so that we can also answer questions like, for instance, if we know holistically across the state, and this is not just looking at the people that we serve, what the number of people under a certain income threshold is, we can then compare that with the number of people that the state actually does serve. And then we can see actually the gap. Like maybe we need to do more outreach and be able to reach these people.
I think that's enough nerd talk for today. I really appreciate you coming, and thank you for taking the time today.
It's been a pleasure.